Person den rechten
La cantante de Maria 200 ans a permis 2% de la population.
Teil an der Nordseite sowie des Außenbereichs
Moving forward.
When I tell you that we're going to go to the urban fringe, here these are the outer limits, the outer membrane of the Toulouse metropolitan area. These are still areas where housing developments are being built with shoebox stores to go along with them. And this is something that goes along the National 124, the motorway going from Toulouse to Auch. That should be expanded to a four-lane road at long last, I may say. So let's move to the urban fringes and let's rather go to the rural fringes. That may sound provocative. Well, I think I've piqued your curiosity. But what I suggest that we do is to consider the same area, these outer fringes of the urban area, and look at them from a different angle through the lens of policies that have been implemented by rural authorities to welcome new populations. And here there's a new population that's emerging, a new territorial momentum emerging. It cannot be approached through the traditional peri-urban lens. So here, I'll look at a special local development scheme called So Solo, supported by the Gers département, implemented about 12 years ago, to receive welcome telecommuters. It's something that has really been stepped up in the last 4-5 years, since 2008-9, and I conducted the survey as well as a number of interviews, and I've also put things back in their context by looking at the work of the Ville Campagne Collective, that's very active, as well as the work of the Réseau Rural, rural network. To talk about this population first. Talking about this demographic of telecommuters, looking at the age aspect is very important in many respects. First, as Francis Bossir said, here we're talking about medium people who are at the middle of their life cycle, rather in the second half of their life cycle. They're between 40 and 60. Most of them are urban dwellers. In the case of Gers, 15 to 20% of them come from Northern Europe. 20% are people from the Gers who've stayed in the Gers département, and the rest come from other regions of France, in particular the Paris region and the French Riviera. And here we're talking about people who move into the Gers département as couples. So here you need to multiply the figures by 2. That's not negligible, these 300 old people, because we're talking about a département with about 100,000 inhabitants. They arrive as couples, and most of them have no children. That's fairly traditional for telecommuters, even at the international level. There are no children because either children have left the nest or because they have not reported any children. And so at the fringes of the Toulouse metropolitan area, these people have a different project than building a living environment for a family. Then the question arises about what decided this relocation around the outer membrane of the metropolitan area. And this is where I can use this age entry point, because you need to look at their professional background. People come to the Gers département to start a new professional life. They had a previous working life as employees or self-employed people, rather working in the towns or the cities. And so they decide to take a new job, either entirely or partly, and settling down as a telecommuter in the Gers mean that from their home they can do all or part of their business, but being full-time telecommuters. So from then on, you can see that there are very few cases of employee telecommuters in this area. What I would also notice is that this professional requalification isn't so much an individual project as a couple project, because they will interweave their professional fates. Both partners are going to reconfigure their active working life. I won't give you details, but rather illustrations with two cases. For instance, a man who will become a telecommuter because his wife decides to open a bed and breakfast, or, for instance, the lady of the house is a partner in a company in the city, and by working from home in the Gers, only spends every 4 weeks in London, so that the gentleman can have his own farm. That's one first case for the arrival of these telecommuters. They also want a typical living environment, looking for old stone houses. Telecommuters, well, there are teams in about 50 towns or villages who work as volunteers to receive telecommuters. And so they show that territory to people after they've discovered it on the internet. They come to discover the territory, and these local volunteers tell you that the main mission that's required from them is to help find a house. And most requests are related to an old stone house to be renovated or with a lot of land. Here, for instance, by way of illustration, at both ends of the spectrum, there's the CLAD, local reception committee at Lambest in the south of the département, which says that it's harder and harder to meet that type of request because the housing stock is becoming depleted. And then you've got the Beaumarchais town in the southwest. They had built a development in the center of the village, and they said that they would become part of Soho Solo because they would receive telecommuters who would live in that development. And it's true that telecommuters arrived in the town, but the mayor was surprised to see that none of them wanted to live in that housing development. And this relocation is motivated by the desynchronization of activities and travel, more than not having to go every day to work. And I mean, this is not something which is a fact, because they replace it with a different type of professional mobility, but I won't dwell on that. The fact is that there's a desynchronization in activities and desynchronization of commuting compared to the generally admitted social times for this category of age. Here, I'll quote from Xavier de Masneau, who is a famous teleworker in Orne, who set up the organization The Village, who says that telecommuting is a way for him to adapt his work to his life, to his lifestyle. And that's something that I found in the testimonials of people who want to work in the evening or in the summer, because that will free up time, and they'll offset that with time from other moments. And another case with the festival in Marciac, where people moved to Marciac to have access to everything that the jazz festival has to offer. Let's not be naive, since these are telecommuters most of the time. They are self-employed professionals, and they have big workloads. However, for most of the people that we met, they wanted to offset that with the idea of taking time differently, making different use of their time. Here on this next slide, talking about territorial dynamics, this new population in the Gers is not a population, a spontaneous generation of telecommuters. They haven't come here because they found the promised land of telecommuters. There's first the filter of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, which was a driving force and has been for about 12 years. However, what's interesting here is what we realized, and that's what I wanted to dwell on now. The territorial strategies amongst these peri-urban strategies show that they're organizing in rural aspects. I talked about the rural network. There's more and more formalized experience sharing schemes. The welcome committees are organized around several teams, and sometimes trips are organized between the different regions. And so beyond the case of Gers, you can see local communities that want to move away from their condition as bedroom communities, and they can see that they cannot be attractive simply based on commuting. From that starting point, then, they have used the internet coverage that was offered to them. That doesn't necessarily culminate in telecommuting-friendly policies, but simply having the internet network available in these rural areas is something that is still left to the choice of the territories. However, such initiatives have been implemented, for instance, in the Orne département. I can give you a longer list about France, but you can see that the actions that work best and that really can attract population are those that simply beyond technical support, saying that we've got a satisfactory bandwidth, we have tele centers. Well, the most successful are those that accompany it with personal help, personal support, including support to families. What I didn't say when I wanted to illustrate this slide is that local reception committees in the Gers receive you for free. These are teams of volunteers for as long as you need it. And so that instantly creates a link. From the moment you click on the interactive map, as 36,000 people do, or have done, you can see where there are telecommuters, where there are support organisms for you to locate there. What are the local reception committees? Then you can see a local discovery of the town, so you can sweep through scan the whole territory. You have tabs that show you the amenities, but that instantly creates a link with people who are already waiting for you there. That's the main selling point for these spaces on the outer membrane of these areas. Everything rests on the fact that of course, you won't have to commute to work every day. You can have different ways of working, less standard ways of working, but that also shows that there will be a lower risk when you relocate there because you'll be more supported. So the reason that I wanted to tell you right off the bat that I would take you to these peri-rural areas rather than peri-urban areas, it's not simply to be at loggerheads with the peri-urban logic that we've seen since the morning. It's simply to show that we need to look differently at these territories. There's a certain amount of hybridization going on in these territories. This peri-rural logic, as I called it, let me in about 12 minutes show you that there is a fairly specific population of workers who are not really family-oriented, but who still relocate in these areas, and maybe during the Q&A we'll be able to answer the question whether we are seeing a rise of this phenomenon. There's a growing volume of telecommuters. When you look at the statistics of people who are interested in telecommuting and relocating, there's also a growing number of territories which are interested in this type of initiatives and actually set them up. And that's something also that was said in the previous roundtable. Now there are territories that are peri-urban and actively accept it and even promote it and turn it into a differentiation factor. Thank you. Francis Bossir, what's your comment? I wasn't writing a letter to my parents, mind you. You said at the beginning that in the 1980s there had already been a spate of research work about telecommuting, and then it fell back because it was too early. So maybe here in a way it's maybe 40 years later things have changed, and these questions that have been forgotten a little, and there hasn't been a lot of development in the field. A lot of experiments failed, and that remained really anecdotal. I still remember an RATP experiment in urban areas for a telecommuting building, bringing together the employees from different firms in a building near their place of residence. It was in Villejuif, I think. And anyway, things have become forgotten, and it's re-emerging, maybe because of energy issues. 40 years ago, people wrote that that energy issues in the peri-urban were a big problem. That was 40 years ago, and no one cared because it wasn't so important. Maybe new developments are giving more traction to these past thoughts. I had 3 questions about what you said. Well, let's not dwell on that forever, but you can still see the socio-economic and social-cultural gaps. And the same as before, these are people, highly skilled white-collar workers, mostly micro companies or self-employed professionals. For that phenomenon to become more broad-based and have more people rooted near their place of residence, something needs to happen in companies. Whereas here, that's not a problem because people make their own decision to come and relocate there to set up shop. Maybe, just to answer so I don't forget, I'm not trying to prove that then this phenomenon will expand. I'm simply here to talk about this part of the population, to say that maybe we can look differently at what's going on in these territories. Here, I don't necessarily want to show that there's a wave of telecommuting that will sweep through France. Regarding your second question about initiatives, personal initiatives, well, things are changing. In the official journal of November, there's a law about telecommuting that was published about government on one hand, and also, well, dream on, but I think that in companies we're more or less at the same level as issues of electrical cars. The fleet of e-cars is there for communications purposes to show that you're a trendy company, but telecommuting is more or less a fig leaf like that. So that wave is not about to sweep through the country.
Den Rechten.